I love how before the episode even starts, I love how in our Discord chat where we all are, Steve called me out for keeping secrets.
all the
Steve's like,
time.
I know that Daniel has some sort of secret thing, and he's withholding it from me.
I
Steve,
choose my words very carefully. You're absolutely withholding it because you want like that initial like unboxing shot
no,
of
no,
us
no,
because we
no,
have
no,
no
no,
idea what you have.
no, no, no. What I want is Steve holding his brain.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
I haven't released it yet, but because I've been just like I've been working. Um, but we on our latest Dungeons and Agents, we came to this revelation that Steve is the only one who appears on the show or the stream who does this, and he holds his brain when things get so intense, and he does this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hold your brain when things get
Hold your
intense.
brain, y'all.
Hold your brain, y'all. That being said, hold your brain, everyone. It's Friday. I'm gonna say it's Friday every single time because that was the title that could have been the title of the series.
Yeah, that
but
was your pitch, right?
that was my pitch, but
It
yeah,
lost, and here
That
we
we
are.
veto.
yeah, it almost became many things that I didn't want. But hey, it's Friday, everyone. My name's Daniel, and next to me, to my left and right on the overlay, are my two co-hosts. I have Agatha. Wait, no, I have Agatha, and I have Steve.
Hi.
This is the wrap up. This is our new show. This is our new Friday evening show where we talk about things we love and the sort of discourse in the tabletop gaming sort of space. This could be, the latest thing that Critical Role has done, and not the latest episode, but the latest snafu that they might have found themselves in. This could be something that Wizards of the Coast has published, or this has just been like it could just be a theme that we want to talk about. But before we get into the format of the show, I want to introduce the three guests we have below me on the overlay. Let's start we'll go Jeremy, Emma, and then Adam Ali. Introduce yourselves. I know that Jeremy and Emma, you are regulars at this point, every single Friday up until, well, not
No,
up
we
until a
haven't
point,
stopped
because
yet.
you haven't stopped yet. Regulars every Friday, but we have new people tuning into the show who might not have joined us to talk about fantasy, samurai, landlocked Japan. So who are you and what do you do?
Yes, I am Jeremy. I'm a journalist. I wrote about D&D a couple times, and that's how I actually met the amazing crew here. I previously was on the Asians Read L5R Legend of the Five Rings live stream with half of the people here. But it's interesting. I'm actually a fairly recent player of role-playing games. I didn't actually start playing RPGs until 2017. So actually I'm kind of the key demographic that Wizards of the Coast probably wants to attract with a book like Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition in general. So I started playing RPGs in 2017 because my friends in Hong Kong finally, gave me a group that was willing to teach me how to play, and I had a good group of friends. Shout out to my German friend Malta, who was our very first DM. And I played a couple sessions, and then I think like 2 months after I played my first D&D session, I started DMing for the first time myself. So I really just like dove headfirst in, and afterwards it was going from D&D to like Pathfinder, looking at previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons, going to like Call of Cthulhu, going to Legend of the Five Rings, experimenting with World of Darkness. I've still never been in a really good World of Darkness campaign, sad to say. I'd like to experience it someday. But right now I'm kind of really wrapped up in a whole bunch of campaigns, most of them D&D 5th edition, because that's what people around me who I often introduce role-playing games to, because I've really decided to bring role-playing games to my friends who might have been interested but like me hadn't had the chance to play them growing up. So most of them want to start with like D&D just for name value. So I have a lot to talk about and think about in regards to this episode of the wrap up.
Boom. Okay, and Emma.
All right. So, yeah, I was also on the L5R stream, which sort of started what I do here with Asians Represent. It also got me into some cultural consultancy, cultural consultancy and sensitivity reading for TTRPG, despite the fact that I have never played. I am very new to a lot of this, despite having friends who have been doing this for a very long time, like Daniel. So I am an archaeologist who does research in northern Japan, and a lot of experience with representations of the past Japanese culture and what that means for diaspora people like myself in Canada. I don't know if there's anything else.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then how about you, Adam Ali?
Hi, my name's Adam Ali. You may also know me from here, Asians Represent, where I am part of the regular team that critically reviews Al-Qadim. Every episode from the second. I was part of the second onward. So I'll see you on a Saturday soon. Yay! I'm also, you all also might recognize me from the Critical Read Kindred of the East episode that we put out. And sometimes I get referenced on the L5R stream, especially whenever brown people show up because I'm in the chat screaming. But like Jeremy, I was introduced to role-playing games very recently. I think my first was in 2016. And like Jeremy, it was also, 5th edition. So I'm, again, one of the people who, I guess, came in with 5th edition because they got attracted to the name and the branding of 5th edition. And, Critical Role specifically was what helped me get in. So yeah, I have a variety of thoughts. Nowadays, I'm a tabletop writer, designer, consultant, community organizer, reader, enjoyer, player, and streamer. In fact, that's kind of reference what I was playing this week. I was streaming.
Yeah, hell yeah. And you know what's really funny? Like you said, like Critical Role got you into this, and I know that people either like really love or really dislike Critical Role, but I think Critical Role does a really great job of introducing people to this hobby, and I'm grateful for Critical Role because that means that people like you, Adam Ali, wouldn't be in this community if not for Critical Role. So shout out to Critical Role for that. Before we get into the show, I've been trying to figure out a way to do this, or if I needed to do this on social media, but Steve and I actually spent like a part of an evening trying to figure it out. But Wizards of the Coast actually sent me some free stuff. I get a lot of free stuff sent to me, and Wizards of the Coast sent me these custom Astro headsets. He sent me 2 pairs. These are Astro A40s. They've got these little like magnetic plates and stuff. They're pretty neat. But they sent these to me for free, alongside like a piece of paper with instructions on how to, post on social media that they sent you an influencer package. So Steve and I gave one of them to Steve. And that was the second time I've seen Steve in person this year, and it was for like 10 seconds. And, we talked about like how we would acknowledge getting this stuff for free, but also kind of reconcile the relationship that we have with D&D. And I think it's really important to bring that up now, given the fact that the inaugural episode of the show, the wrap-up, is about D&D. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, Steve and I got a pair of free headsets each. They're like these cool custom gaming headsets. But this really doesn't change how we feel about Wizards of the Coast and their properties. It really doesn't change, how critically we will evaluate them. If anything, it will make us even more critical because we understand the responsibility that we have and the opportunities that we have within Wizards of the Coast to affect great change and bring about good Asian representation. So yeah, I think that's the perfect time to say it now. That said, it's time to talk a little bit about this stream. What is the wrap up? If you tuned in to our L5R streams, you know that I've kind of been like trying to figure out what to do after L5R. Do we continue doing Asians Read? It took us 40 hours to get through L5R, and it will take us 30 years to get through Karatur and Al-Qadim. So how do we cover the wider breadth of tabletop gaming experiences? And I figure a weekly talk show would be the best idea. And so I started talking with Agatha and Amar, and we were like, okay, how do we figure out a show? None of us are good at names. And like, kid you not, Hey, our show's called Asians Represent. We have Asians Read, Critical Read, and Dungeons and Asians.
Dungeons and Asians, I like.
Which is a dope name.
But we picked Dungeons
Yeah.
and Asians because it was the least bad of all the names that we had thought of. But like we struggled to figure out a
true.
name of a show, and then I think Pam gave the idea, and then it got to me through Pam and Rachel, then Mahar. It got to be from the RPGC folks who were like the wrap up, and I loved it because of the imagery, the wrappings, the dumplings, the variety of foods you find in Asian cultures that features some sort of pastry skin.
Skin pastries.
I saw the hesitation.
I know, I was
and then
like,
I saw
wait.
you go with it.
Wait, I'm going with it.
But you made it worse by extending that S so long.
I know.
For our final episode, now that we've disturbed everyone.
Yeah. But yeah, we ended up with the wrap up. So what is this show? What is this stream? If you're watching it live, thank you for joining us every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're watching it on YouTube, these will be uploaded at the same time as our L5R episodes were uploaded, and that's the Monday after at 10 a.m. Eastern. So every stream or every video, we're going to start by just talking about what we've played this week. This could be a new TTRPG that we're reading. It could be a report from an ongoing game, or even a video game that we feel like we are passionate about or we want to talk about. Following that, we're going to dive into something awesome. On Asians Represent, we don't talk enough about the things that are awesome. So we're going to talk about things that we like. This might not necessarily be an Asian thing, but it's going to be something we're passionate about. So it's recommended from an Asian, I guess. So again, this could be a creator on the rise. This could be a piece of design work. This could be a source book, or even just a game mechanic that you really want to recommend. And then we'll finish things off with some industry discourse. And this week's topic is race, Dungeons and Dragons, and the new source book, Tasha's. So we're going to be talking about a recent article that was posted on a website called Dicebreaker, where Jeremy Crawford, the lead designer for 5th edition D&D, said that improvements to racial depictions will take several years to fully implement. And we'll talk about what that means and how we feel about it. But before we get into that, I want to kind of make this a more casual talk show. And I want to start by asking you folks, well, what did you play this week? And if anybody could go first, and if you haven't played, I could go first since it's the first episode, or Steve if you want to, because you're just like
I love this
So
because
excited.
whenever there's like, oh, I need a volunteer before you finish the sentence, I'm like,
oh,
I'm here.
hold my brain.
Hold my brain, hold everything, because I got this, regardless of what the volunteer position is, and that has landed me in hot water a lot of times. but that's okay, because if you ask for a volunteer and your volunteer needs any kind of expertise, you probably shouldn't be asking for a volunteer.
So Steve, what have you played this week? We'll keep this segment clear and concise. What did you play this week and why? What did you like?
I for the criticism I have for Dungeons and Dragons, I have a weekly D&D game. And I wanted to express my love for this homebrew race called the Felis. The Felis are tiny cat people the size of house cats. They are adorable. They can look like normal house cats, but they have full autonomy and whatnot. It's a free supplement. And I had a new player join our game after 8 weeks of hiatus due to real life reasons for one of the players. This new player has joined and said, I want to be a grave cleric that looks like a very small black and white house cat. And I'm like, I'm into this. And they were so afraid to be like, as the DM, I would be like, no, I don't want this homebrew race in. But I said, no, this is dope. You're passionate about it. Let's put this in here. And now they're just part of it, and they're adorable. They like are healing people by purring at them. Like I'm into this. So that is my joy that I'm sharing today for my my D&D game.
Sick. I guess I could go after that because I also play a weekly D&D game. So I play a weekly D&D game through a therapeutic organization that I run called Level Up Gaming. And we play 5th edition D&D because it's accessible and it's popular and it's what our clients want. And I've I actually don't want to shout out the D&D part, but I want to shout out the module that we're playing through. And it's called Castle Shintalin. And it's by Gabor Lux, who's a pretty prominent, very, very famous designer in the OSR space. So Gabor Lux wrote this 1980s, 1970s style mega dungeon called Castle Shintalin. And it can be used as like a one-off expedition into a haunted castle. It could be used as the setting for an entire campaign, but it's designed to take characters from level 1 to level 7. And I've kind of been using it as the focal point for a sort of investigative campaign where our players are hired by His Dread Majesty Gulfrey to investigate the Malivol family who owns Castle Shintalin. And they're tasked with actually going in and finding evidence of heresy against this religious empire. And so this coming Monday is going to be our 8th session. So I've kind of used this giant mega dungeon as a campaign setting. It's really cool. I highly recommend going out and purchasing a copy of Castle Shintalin. It's really awesome. It actually doesn't have too much of a plot. And like many of my favorite OSR publications, this is more of a toolkit. So you could use it the way you want. So yeah, I'm playing Castle Shintalin. So we have Agatha, Jeremy, Emma, and Adam Ali. Who wants to go next?
I will. What I played this week, actually what I've been playing a lot of are hacks of the game Good Society. The Good Society is a Jane Austen inspired role-playing game. It can be GM'd or it can be facilitated and or GM-less, depending on how you want to go about it. And it's by V. Hendro and Haley. Oh no, I forgot her last name. Anyway, they're the Story Brewers is the publishing company, and this particular hack is called Gothic Society, and it's written by Jean Astodon. Sorry, Jean, if I mispronounce your name. It's really sick. What you do is you get to play. You can set the game in Victorian London is the default setting, and then you get to play people living out the dramatics of their lives while also dealing with this encroaching evil that everyone can collaborate together to come up with. Like you come up with the nature of it, how it manifests, how people have thought about ways to combat it, and then you incorporate it into the game. And it's just so atmospheric. The game that I've been playing, we decided to set it in Venice during the Renaissance, and it's so fun. I know nothing.
Steve's holding his brain. Hold your brain.
Hold your brain, y'all. That sounds dope as hell.
It is so dope. Also, like all of the players are really into researching. So then we've been like posting masks in our like Discord for like inspiration pictures. And then there was it was the carnival, and then like things were happening. People fell into the canals and then like never appeared again. It was just Gothic Society is so good. Like if you want to play a game, and there's specific to play it, you do need Good Society, the base game, because it has all the mechanics and stuff, and it's just like an add-on. But first of all, Good Society is amazing, and if you ever care about things like Pride and Prejudice, then you should play it. And then also Gothic Society, just chef's kiss.
I got to meet V at Big Bad Con last year, and they are wonderful. I hope to one day have them on this show.
Yeah, both V and Haley.
So we've got the entire top row done of our overlay. Agatha, myself, and Steve. Jeremy, Emma, Adam, Ali. Who's going next? What did you play?
I can go.
Yeah.
So I'm currently DMing 3 5th edition campaigns, which is probably way too many. Luckily, one of them is finishing soon, and the one that I had just yesterday was Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frost Maiden. So using like the official new module that just came out, and I think we're about 6 sessions in bi-weekly, and I've enjoyed it so far. I've liked it more than some of the other official modules that I've run, and my players have just hit level 3, so they get to actually use some of the subclasses in this book potentially. But it's always, as with any kind of big kind of hard cover Wizards of the Coast product, I never use all of it. Like I hack them substantially and throw in a lot of homebrew stuff and my own twists and turns. So it's been interesting.
Nice. I really admire that. You got 3 ongoing D&D games going right now. That's pretty
ones
intense.
that I've been
That you're
running for new
GMing.
players.
Yeah.
That I'm GMing for new players. And I actually I do not really recommend that. It's a lot. And I think I need to bring it down to I think 2 is the max for me.
I was like, I don't know if I really admire you, Jeremy. I'm just worried for you.
Yeah, 2 is the max for me. 3, I took on the story of how I got involved in all of these is that like I moved from Hong Kong to New York in 2018, and then I wanted to make friends. I wanted to play RPGs with people, and the fastest way to do that was being like, hey, I know how to run D&D games. And suddenly I get like, boom, this influx of people, and that led to many of my friendships, but it also led to like these pretty long ongoing campaigns that I need to that have slowly been gradually wrapping up. So
Yeah, I've got 3 ongoing games, and I'm GMing 2 of them.
and that's a lot of work too.
Honestly, only one of them is a lot of work, and it's the Dungeons and Asians campaign because I have to do so much behind the scenes on that one. Another one, I'm a player, and I'm on my like everyone who follows me on Twitter knows, I'm on my 3rd character.
Yeah.
Just 'cause I keep dying.
He's not dead yet?
No. I know my GM didn't kill me last session. I will.
Longest surviving character.
Yes, as of this week, my longest surviving character in this adventure. Emma or Adam Ali, what have you played this week?
Go for it.
I'll go next, sure. It's been quite a lot. I've had a very busy week-ish. So during the weekend, I was on Fuck Cancer Roll Dice, and I played Quest with some wonderful folks. Saturday, I did something. This is the one dangerous thing about doing too much. You don't remember all the things you've done. But just like 2 days ago on Wednesday, I was in the penultimate game of a streamed game that we do, Monster of the Week, on Off the Table, all BIMPOC, all queer, surprisingly enough, called The Burn Bunch, with some wonderful, wonderful folks. Russ, who was also the GM of the first season of Prison Pals, is the one. They're the one GMing this, and it's been super entertaining. Especially because like Monster of the Week can get really Western because because the monsters referenced are very Western, but instead it's been pulling from all sorts of monstrous tales, and because we're all BIMPOC, we're all desperate to like introduce more of our culture through it. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a huge amount of fun. I'm always on the lookout for more games though. I've recently left a couple games, so I've got some openings on my palette.
I mean, Adam Ali, did this Monster of the Week thing? Did I ever tell you about what we were gonna do on Asians Represent?
No.
We were gonna do like still maybe we might do a monster hunting society sort of game where the GM for the session is somebody who is actually going to teach the cast about a creature from their culture. And it's like a pan-Asian monster hunter society, like an agency.
Yeah.
Yes.
We weren't sure if we were gonna use Delta Green or
Yeah, we're
Monster
like
of the
Delta
Week.
Green, Monster of the Week, or Knights Black Agents.
Pretty awesome idea.
That's
or
cool.
something custom. Hold your brain.
Hold your breath.
I'm holding
That sounds
the
like
brain.
an indie zombie game. Like hold your brain.
So I recently got out of a Gumshoe system game. We played Fear Itself, but damn, it's a very fun system for
I
learning.
need to
Gumshoe's
play more
system.
Gumshoe.
Maybe
Yeah.
we should do Knights Black Agents then. We could do a
Right,
session
that's what I
0. We could even do a series of session 0s where we
see
make
which one
characters to see which
we-
ones we like.
Yeah.
Did you say Knights Black Agents or Knights Black Agents?
It's Knights Black Asians. Yeah.
Agents.
You
agents.
play as secret
Agents.
Asians.
Secret Asians.
We're also secret Asians.
That's the series. That's the series. It's just going to be called Secret Asians. I'm sorry. I'm just going to write this down.
Oh my goodness.
We need, yeah, but the moment we do that, people are going to ask for friggin' t-shirts. You know that, right?
I'm so sorry.
Oh,
I'm
that's,
so sorry. Don't make
that's
that a
not
t-shirt.
good.
I'm not going to make a shirt of that. It might be called Secret Asians. There we go. Thanks, Emma.
Okay.
Oh, no problem.
Wow. That is a trouble.
Speaking of Emma, what have you been playing this week?
Well, I've been playing an ongoing replay of, well, as I said, don't play TTRPGs, but whenever times get weird, I fall back on Breath of the Wild.
Yes.
Yep.
And then I just run around cooking things and hanging out with monsters.
with the masks?
Yeah, I love putting on the masks and hanging out with the creatures. But I have, over the last few months, picked up some RPG books that I've been reading or looking forward to reading, just to get an understanding of how these things are written and played. And most recently, I picked up all of Mahar's games, and I am so excited to read them.
Oh.
Maharhar.itch.io.
Yeah. I looked briefly at some. It's like, oh, the stories. I'm into it. So, yeah.
Mahar stuff is super good. Super good.
Did you pick them up during the Black Friday sale?
I did, yes.
Oh, smart.
So Emma, since you're buying TTRPGs now, can I give you some stuff? I have.
Since you're buying things, like, are you offering to give them for free, or are you?
I'm giving them
like,
for free.
selling
I'm
them
giving
to
them
me?
to you for free. I have 4 players' handbooks. For some reason, I have 4 players' handbooks. Can I give?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have 4 players'
Yeah.
handbooks. I have 2 copies of Coriolis.
How did you end up with all this
I
stuff?
don't know. People just give me stuff.
I have been meaning to read Coriolis from cover to cover because
We should talk about Coriolis because that's one that I want to actually talk about.
Yeah,
on the episode
I
of
would.
the
I would
wrap-up.
like to play Coriolis at some point.
Yeah, it's weird because it's a game that I deeply love from a systematic perspective. I really like it. I think it's both tactical and really rules light at the same time. But there are certain cultural themes that I feel like I miss because they are not my lived experience, because it is marketed as Arabian Nights in space.
Which is actually what made me want to play it. So whether it succeeds at that or not,
But then
I don't know. But it did catch my attention.
But then there's the baggage of Arabian Nights in space, and then there's also the fact that they're trying to portray the Islamic world in space. And I don't know if it's good or not, and I would love to have that conversation on stream about the game, because I have played so much Coriolis. I guess that's why I have 2 copies of the core rulebook. But anyways, now that we've kind of gone over games that we've been playing, it's time to talk about something awesome. What is something awesome in your life? What is a game that you would recommend, a book you'd recommend, a creator you'd recommend? Emma, you've recommended Mahar, but you could always recommend another. I have one that I wanted to talk about during our Asians Recommend stream, which kind of evolved into the wrap-up, and that's Emberwind, Skies of Axia.
Ooh.
Oh,
It's a pretty book. I've actually got 2 Emberwind books. So I've got Skies of Axia, and I've got Emberwind, the Hero Manual. It is a brilliant series of books by Derek Chung, a Toronto-based TTRPG designer. Derek used to actually be a therapist and a psychologist, and has kind of taken his own brand of psychology and has worked that into his game design. So I really like Emberwind for that. Emberwind is super tactical. It's generally something that you need to play using like minis or tokens, or a tool like Owlbear Rodeo or Roll20. But what's really cool about it is that it's got scaling rules. So there are really, really advanced tactical rules, and then there are beginner rules. But what's really neat is that these rule sets can be played at the same time and at the same table. So if you are like a parent and you want to introduce your kids to role-playing games, but you have like a teenager and like an 8-year-old, the teenager can use the advanced or like sort of mid-range rules, whereas the 8-year-old can use the beginner rules, and they can have the exact same narrative experience, which is what I really like about Emberwind. Emberwind also has rules for like AI, so for creature and enemy behavior. So it's really neat. I have a lot of respect for Derek, who created this series. He's got like the biggest like con hustle of anybody. He's at like every single con, weekend after weekend. And anybody who's in the Toronto scene knows this. Adam Ali, you've met Derek at Breakout Con. Steve, you've seen Derek at like pretty much, I think, he goes to anime cons.
Derek,
but Adam Ali, do you remember?
So not only that, not only do I remember meeting Derek Chung at friggin' PAX Unplugged.
So the joke here for everyone is that
No, don't.
I'm gonna say, because Agatha brought it up. We were talking about how we all met, and Adam Ali forgot when he had met Agatha for the first time, and it was at basically as like a house party LARP. And Adam was like, were you with this group of people? We were hanging out, Asian squatting and eating food. So we've been roasting Adam Ali about that for all evening. But yeah, check out Derek Chung. His company is called Nomnivore Games. Super cute logo, Nomnivore Games.
That's fun.
So that's my recommendation, Emberwind. Check out Emberwind. Asian creator as well. Who wants to go next? I volunteered and then Steve's gonna go, but
of course I'm next. I'm going to shout out myself. No,
go ahead, Steve.
It's
Yo,
me,
I'm here for
best-selling
that.
author Steve.
No, so you said the criteria was like being positive and positivity in here. So I wanted to share my positivity where I have a bunch of sports injuries and they just accumulate, and during lockdown they only get worse. But my shout out is for myself to understand that I was pushing myself way too hard with my remote Zoom gym sessions. I have a back injury, and my injury is so bad that I'm beginning to like lose feeling. My fingers will get numb because of some pinched nerve or something like that. And I absolutely know that I am now injured, and I'm going to not try to push it because that's only going to ask for more injuries. I am going to wait and be gentle with myself until such a time that it's safe enough, that I feel safe enough to go back to my physiotherapist and ask for help. So that is my positivity for the week.
It's good.
Thanks for that interpretation, Steve. I appreciate that. All right, who's next? What do you recommend? Like Emma, you've kind of glowed about Mahar's work, and I know we've talked about Mahar a lot. But what else? Is there anything else?
I have a recommendation that I think will transition well into the next section of the show, so maybe I go last.
Okay,
that's cool.
Oh, now we're all just like skip everyone else.
I have a similar recommendation.
Maybe I should Daniel's
go.
Work for him. Wow.
Maybe I should go like either before.
So we have
Emma
two
or
segues.
after Emma.
We have two
You wanna put it
segues.
in
Do you also have a segue?
Should we do a
Put it in our
vote?
chat.
Should we do a
My
vote?
shit.
No.
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 Straight up. No.
I'll go next because why not? So there's two like really so first of all, for positive, I don't get to see brown people very often in games. People who look like me is what I mean. One of the games that I really do appreciate that I think that's done that really well, as best as it could with the confines of the game system it was in, Uncharted: The Lost Legacy is a mini game set in the Uncharted universe. It is super cool. It stars like fan favorite Chloe Sullivan, and you learn a lot about her Indian heritage, her connection with her Indian father, and he's like also this big archaeologist. And it is really nice in the Uncharted game specifically to explore a country, with someone trying to forge a connection with that country because she has ancestry from there, and that's your experience with Chloe. It's really, really well done and really, really pretty.
It's the best.
It's
one of the controversial. It's one of the best Uncharted games.
I mean, is that controversial? It is the best Uncharted game.
I really love Uncharted 2.
I love Uncharted 2 too,
But not for the story. I love the set pieces of Uncharted 2. I love the train. I love the helicopter chase scene.
I love the set pieces. I happen to really like the villain characters in Uncharted 2, both of them. Uncharted 3 is a special place in my heart because Ubar was like, it's a place that's always existed in my imagination, so to see something of it realized was fun. But Uncharted The Lost Legacy is my favorite. But out of that, my other positivity is gonna go to honestly, like, someone was asking me, what are you really proud of about yourself recently? And I'm like, nothing. And they said, no, you can't answer that. And I said, thinking about it, I've spent 2020 in lockdown, and I started off 2020 getting sick, but I've since spent it like hanging out with extremely cool people, doing project after project. I'm now writing Tabletop, like, not only through Asians Represent, but specifically here, I've had some hustle, and I kind of want to shout myself out for a bit. And last but not least, huge recommendation. Dungeons into Asians is fantastic. If you're not listening yet, why aren't you?
Oh,
Just saying.
oh,
Damn.
I can't wait for y'all to listen. I wish I had the new episode ready and queued up to go, but I don't. I don't. So it'll come out very, very soon, the new D&DA episode. Jade joined the cast. It was Steve.
It was so fucking good.
It was really good. We had a huge combat episode. Things got really intense. It was super anime.
We need a shrimp emote. Sorry, Twitch emotes.
Yeah, we'll get a shrimp thing. We're trying to. Here's the thing. Now that you mentioned the shrimp, sorry, that was a phone call. Tracy from the Broadswords, her husband, was calling me, and I just hung up on him. We're friends. He's probably just calling. Jesse or Tracy, if you're watching this, Jesse texted me after an episode of The Mandalorian had come out, and I hadn't watched it yet, and led the text with, "Oh my God!" insert spoiler. Yeah, that happened.
I feel that.
I was gonna say like a thing on merch. We still haven't settled on a merch design yet, so it could be a shrimp, it could be a shrimp knight and a noodle dragon. Who knows? But anyways, Agatha, what do you have to recommend? What do you
First
like?
of all, I would really like to recommend a specific flavor for bubble tea, which is what I'm having right now. This is not
I saw you
sponsored.
drinking
I'm
that.
turning
I
it
was
away
like,
so that
Yeah.
it's not. Don't look at it. But so if you ever want to get bubble tea and you're like, okay, I'm not into that like basic milk black tea with tapioca. I want to be in the know, or I am kind of lactose intolerant. Well, I got you. If either of those apply, I highly recommend mango and or passion fruit green tea with pearls, or with what is the jelly, the
Coconut jelly.
I'm like going
Coconut
very
jelly.
Taiwanese. QQ.
Yeah. Yeah. Either one of those usually is not bad. If you're going to a place where you're like, okay, I don't know the quality of this place for the bubble tea, then I would recommend passion fruit. That's better. Mango is sometimes it's sketchy. So, but anyway, if it's like a good place, then get the mango. Because
What does kind of lactose intolerant mean, Agatha? Just
That's me.
It's
Half
bearable,
Asian,
that-
but like getting increasingly lactose intolerant as I get older. I swear to God, it's a thing. It's
Great.
happening. Sorry, guys. It's just something I've been dealing with in my 30s.
no, I feel you. I feel kind of lactose intolerant is like I really can struggle through this if I want to, but it's a struggle. That's what kind of lactose intolerant means. It means that I am lactose intolerant, but not like deadly.
So Agatha, your recommendation is bubble tea? Of that flavor, and that's okay. That's okay.
That's
The
specific
way you
flavor.
said
That
that,
specific
Daniel.
flavor, cool. Yeah, it's really funny, Agatha, because I learned something from you, and then I ended up using it in a consultation. I did a consultation, and then during the consultation, I told them, "You know what boba means, right?"
Oh my gosh, I was just gonna ask if it's about boba.
this is
Yeah,
my
so-
favorite segment.
me and my girlfriend are getting a dog, and we were coming up with names. We wanted to name the dog like something related to like food. We ended up on like nori, which nori, like Japanese seaweed.
Yeah.
But we were going through a lot of things. We wanted to name her like yumcha for a while, and like a siomai for a while also. But then one thing that we shot around was boba, and I was like, "Ooh, we should know." 'cause- Yeah.
Whoa!
And I had to
X-card that
explain
name. X-card that.
I had to
name.
explain what boba means. The slang. What it means.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I think my favorite thing is talking to Taiwanese people, and then they also call it boba, and then I'm like,
We should explain.
What it
We
means,
should explain what it means because Emma and
Oh,
Adam
yeah.
Ali are like, what?
What?
Agatha or Jeremy, do you want to explain?
No. I've actually had this explained to me. I think Agatha specifically. This was during a different conversation.
in one of the times that we met
Oh.
and talked to each other.
That time when you were squatting in a group of people.
Wait, Agatha and I have met before?
So for the
Turns
audience, so I'm gonna producer Daniel's gonna reel it in. So enough roasting Adam Ali at least for now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So Agatha, do you want to explain why we're all laughing at the boba?
No, I want Jeremy to
Or
explain.
Jared,
it.
you go. Just pass it on.
So,
Yeah.
boba, even though they refer to like the tapioca pearls in milk tea, it's actually Taiwanese slang for a woman with really big boobs, like big boobs, spherical, because they're boba and like tapioca sphere. So next time you call something boba, just realize you're technically calling it big boobs.
Yep. So it was actually during I did a consultation for Dimension 20. And they had a new series,
Oh.
and they wanted me to consult on some things that happened during an episode. And one of the things that came up was they were talking about boba. And I was like, okay, well, first of all, like this made me giggle, and second of all, the game that they're playing is set in New York. It's their sort of urban fantasy D&D show, and nobody on the East Coast calls it boba. Boba is a West Coast thing. It's bubble tea. So I got to pull out that little thing that I learned from Agatha. So yay, boba. So in terms of votes, somebody named DM Steve tied up all the votes, and it got tied between Jeremy and Emma.
I saw that.
Wait,
We already
Daniel,
resolved this.
did you talk?
I did,
about
yeah. I
your-
recommended Emberwind.
Oh yes, you did.
That was 100 years ago, though.
Yeah, you forgot about me like Adam Ali forgot about you.
Oh my goodness.
Oh
my fucking
Emma or
God.
Jeremy, who wants to go?
I think we decided that I'll go first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if you want to,
Yeah.
we can like Rochambeau on camera, but it's okay.
No,
I know,
it's
but
okay.
there's the delay with Zoom.
Oh, there's
though.
a delay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Go
And
for it,
here's
Emma.
the thing, it's not RPG related, and it's kind of left over from the Agents Recommend as well. But because we've used Orientalism, the book by Edward Said, quite a bit on the Critical Read and Asians Represent stuff in general. If you haven't looked into further work by Edward Said, he did another book called Culture and Imperialism, which is a direct follow-up to Orientalism, because he saw a whole lot of stuff missing in his first book, and that is primarily how people resist and fight back against how they have been represented and how they are understood by dominant imperialist societies. So further reading, not so much fun, but perhaps instructive, and I think somewhat related to what we're going to be talking about today, which is essentially resistance and doing the right thing for yourself.
Damn, that would have been a great segue.
I mean, I can do mine now. It's
Yeah,
It
go.
still
we can
works.
dive fully into the RPG side of it.
Yeah, let's
I
do
would
it.
I would like to recommend the Ancestry and Culture supplement that Arcanist Press put out, an alternative to race in 5th edition D&D. You probably heard about this if you've been following the D&D discourse over, the different races in the game and the bioessentialist ideas that all orcs are stronger than anyone else, or elves all have this type of magic, or dwarves are born this way. This supplement, I haven't finished reading all of it, but I can already tell you it's better than what is in Tasha's, because it's an in-depth breakdown of all of the fantasy cultures in Dungeons and Dragons. What is the culture of elves? What is the culture of tieflings? Here are some traits within that culture. And then instead of saying that oh, my strength goes up by 2 because I'm playing as a half orc, you actually go in depth and be like, I would like to have my character embody this aspect of orcish culture or this aspect of elvish culture. And so you really get a much more nuanced breakdown that might not necessarily be perfect, but it certainly does do a lot in rectifying the ideas that many players of D&D have been taking aim at over the last year, saying like, why can't we change things in this game, and why does it have to take years to potentially revert some of the racist baggage that D&D has when a supplement like this did it instantly. It's 70 pages. It's a couple bucks on Drive-Through RPG or maybe DM's Guild, and I do recommend it.
I consulted on that book.
Yeah. Oh, and you consulted, so there you go.
Yeah, and same with Pam, the master of our Discord server.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Hi,
think
Pam.
Hey, Pam. I don't think Pam gets enough credit for that. The Dovetailer. Also check out Pam's Patreon and itch store. But Pam is the reason why our Discord is the way it is. I will say that because Pam is the architect. Also, welcome to our 2 new Discord mods, Emma and Adam Ali, who are on stream with us.
Oh yeah, we're both here.
You're both here. So yeah, now that we've kind of segued into D&D, it's time to talk about the topic of the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, for those of you who are watching live, I'm going to drop the news article, the dicebreaker.com article, into our Twitch chat. If you're watching this on YouTube, this article will be in the description of the video. So in this article, Jeremy Crawford said that it would take several years to fully implement improvements on racial depictions. I'm going to go to the actual quote. He said, "We don't consider what we're doing in Tasha's Cauldron to be the end of our work in this regard," he explained. "It's actually a part of a much broader set of steps we're taking, which are really going to take several years to fully implement as we change how we treat some of these aspects of the game." So for context, that is what he said. So I'd like for us to talk about that. I don't know how long we want to talk about this. We still haven't really set out how long we want this stream to be. But this is the last part of the wrap-up where we talk about industry discourse. And this just happens to be race and D&D. So like Jeremy, you said you brought up the Ancestry and Culture book by Arcanist Press, and how, in 70 pages they managed to undo a lot of that bioessentialist
actually
history
like
in D&D.
40 pages, because the last couple pages are an adventure. The last couple pages are an adventure.
Yeah. So in a short book, they could have done that. They already did it. We should probably go to Tasha's and kind of cover what they actually did. I have Tasha's open on D&D Beyond.
I have it in my hand. It's only 2 pages.
This
section,
yeah,
section right there.
That's
it's only
it.
2 pages.
It's one section on D&D Beyond. It covers like, I have my half of a screen, and it covers like a third of that. So a sixth of your screen, I guess. 1/6.
I've got the PDF open.
It's interesting because, and I will say full disclosure, D&D Beyond did give me industry access to everything. So ability score increases. And this, I will say, to their credit, they put this at the beginning of the book. It's not a lot of stuff, but they put it at the beginning of the book. They said, whatever D&D race you choose for your character, you get a trait called ability score increase. This increase reflects an archetypal bit of excellence in the adventurers of this kind in D&D's past. For example, if you're a dwarf, your constitution increases by 2 because dwarf heroes in D&D are often exceptionally tough. This increase doesn't apply to every dwarf, just to dwarf adventurers, and it exists to reinforce an archetype. That reinforcement is appropriate if you want to lean into the archetype, but it's unhelpful if your character doesn't conform to the archetype. And I'm putting emphasis on the word archetype because that's what they're using, and I'm sure we'll discuss that. If you'd like your character to follow their own path, you may ignore your ability score increase trait and assign ability score increases tailored to your character. Here's how to do it. Take any ability score increase you gain in your race or subrace and apply it to an ability score of your choice. If you gain more than one increase, you can't apply those increases to the same ability score, and you can't increase a score above 20. For example, if the ability score increase trait of your race or subrace increases your constitution by 2 and your wisdom by 1, you could instead increase your intelligence by 2 and your charisma by 1. And that's it for ability score increase. This is all in a section called Customizing Your Origin. Do you want to talk about that?
I found it to be so lazy. Like, that was my first thought when I read it, because all it's doing is giving you permission to ignore the standard rules of 5th edition D&D and saying you can take your 2 points and put them in another stat if you want. Like, it felt to me, after having already purchased the Ancestry and Culture book, and after having read other TTRPGs, like Pathfinder 2nd edition is using the word ancestry now and is going in a bit more in depth in this area. It just felt lazy to me. And there's a lot of problems that I do have with 5th edition, where things kind of feel like lazy sort of, you can do this if you want to. Here's permission to tweak if you so desire. I just feel like it was not what folks were hoping when they heard that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything was going to have, a way to customize your character, to remove the bioessentialist aspects of race.
Yeah, I think a big part, kind of a screw up on Wizards' sort of fault, is that they put so much marketing into Jeremy Crawford going around and doing these press tours talking about these big problems that they're going to address, and then they just put it on one page. Right? Yeah. He was on so many podcasts talking about, we're going to fix race, we're going to have a solution here, it's going to be great, you're going to be able to customize your character, and then it was just like a homebrew rule that most people are probably already using.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that Graham Barber, so POC Gamer on Twitter, he said it best. So on his blog, he wrote a blog post called Tasha's Cauldron of No Change. And in one of the paragraphs, he wrote, so what was on that page, referring to the one page that Jeremy and Steve called out, he said, to be honest, sweet fuck all, that's substantive. It's a very basic, uncreative, and status quo supporting rough guide to homebrewing your player race a little bit. It is true.
I mean, so actually, I kind of wanted to quote a different D&D book for a split second, and that is the Player's Handbook. Each race's description in this chapter, this is on page 17 of the printed book under the Choosing a Race section, includes information to help you roleplay a character of that race, including personality, physical appearance, features of society, and racial alignment tendencies. These details are suggestions to help you think about your character. Adventurers can deviate widely from the norm for their race. It is worthwhile to consider why your character is different, as it's a helpful way to think about your character's background and personality. In Tasha's now, under personality, the description of a race might suggest various things about the behavior and personality of that people's archetypical adventurers. You may ignore those suggestions, whether they're about alignment, moods, interests, or any other personality trait. Your character's personality and behavior are entirely yours to determine. So that's the same thing twice, really. And one was in the Player's Handbook, which was printed a while ago, and for fact is it's the one book almost every player probably has, or at least the one book every player is recommended. Obviously, not everyone owns a Player's Handbook.
Do you want one? I've got extras.
It's okay. I've got one too. I got it on sale, which is the only way I buy D&D books, really, because some of them can get a bit much. But here's the thing. As people have been mentioning before, Steve mentioned it, Daniel mentioned it, Jeremy mentioned it, and I'm going to mention it. These homebrew rules they're a better scaffold than just, hey, if you want to ignore it, you can ignore it. I will grant them that, but it's a very minor scaffold. It's basically, if you were ever told, hey, you know what, homebrew your own race from this guideline, it's probably what your DM would have given you anyway. And it's just that written down on a one-sheet piece of paper. And that's why it can be written down on one sheet, because it changes really nothing about the system. It just allows you to take something that's already there and bend it towards your needs, as you probably would otherwise. Those races still exist. Those personalities still exist. You're different.
Yeah, it's like...
And that's
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
That's a big thing that I kind of want to push here. It's that the problem with the system was not that I could not play the good drow or, the neutral aligned orc. I can already do that. The problem with the system was its bioessentialist tendencies, which are somewhat ameliorated by this, and that overall, when you walk into a D&D world, as is, a new DM has this guide in front of them, the first thing they're going to do is make evil orcs and evil goblins and evil drow. And that is not changed by this whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the problem remains that if there is a standard, then if you do personalize and it becomes exceptionalism, like you are not like the others and this is unusual, and like what does that mean for how you play in the larger world?
Well, they set a really big example of that. Like, and I mean, Steve, Jeremy, and myself, we geeked out over these novels and our attachment to them. An episode. Dritz Do'Urden is an iconic character in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. Emma, he's been in a series of like books,
30
graphic
books,
novels, long term series, and an upcoming video game. He's a drow, so he's a dark elf. But in the books that he's in, he is a dark elf who rejects his evil matriarchal culture. So it's like the only matriarchal culture is also innately evil.
Of course.
And they have dark skin. Despite being subterranean, which makes no sense. But
They've been cursed, I think.
Oh yeah, I guess they're cursed or whatever. Still.
Except
But,
now this guy's kind of
but now they
purplish.
released that action figure.
Yeah.
Hasbro released an action figure of him, and he's got light skin.
It's purplish. They made drow skin purplish
Yeah.
now to kind of.
Before it used to be bad. But anyways, he's iconic because he's the first good dark elf, and he's a dark elf hero because he's all good. So it's like you're right. It's you create exceptional characters when they might not necessarily be exceptional. The one thing to note here to maybe put things into context for everyone is before you actually get into the ability score increase section in Tasha's, it talks about customizing your origin, and it says character race in the game represents your character's fantasy species combined with certain cultural assumptions. So that's something to kind of frame our discussion. Race in D&D, as they communicate it here, is your biological species, which in and of itself is an extremely loaded term, and cultural assumptions. Right? So the two are very much intertwined. And that was actually like a question that we got on Twitter. It was from Mahar, actually. We keep shouting at Mahar. And Mahar actually asked, part of the problem with race is that it's often conflated with culture. And how would you handle depictions of the flaws of a society or a culture? And Mahar's example was celebrations of capitalism in 80s America, given that this could be attributed to race.
So, this is actually a good point for me to say hello, because as you might notice, I look a bit different, because I am not East Asian, and I have no East Asian roots, because Asia is a continent. It's not one place. I can't believe I have to say that, but some people do forget it. But when people look at my Twitter account, they don't see me defining myself as Desi whenever, like the section, I refer to myself as brown, because I'm more than just Indian, contrary to people's beliefs, or even Desi. I'm more than just Pakistani or Bangladeshi, etc. I've got a wide amount of roots from places I can't even trace. And when people look at my race, they have this look at my face, sorry, they have this need to kind of fit me into a culture that they understand. When truth is, my face says nothing about my culture. There's a lot of people who are part of the cultures I'm a part of who look nothing like me. And there's a lot of people who look everything like me and are not part of the same cultures, which is why I simplify things if you want to talk about race. And I say, hey, I'm brown, rather than saying specifically I am this or that. Because culture and race are not close to the same thing. I mean, obviously they're not, but it bears repeating and it bears mentioning, not only because any one place has a number of different cultures, but any culture has a number of different faces that are a part of it. Whether you're talking about the big expanded place like the continent of Asia, or a specific place like India, which is the birthplace of 4 different religions and is a major hub of another. Right? No matter where you talk about, like, I think there is basically what I would do is make sure that whatever culture you're depicting has people who look wildly different from one another. And when you're talking about people who do look similar for whatever reason, or even species, you demonstrate that they have multiple different cultures. Because that's what eliminates a lot of the problems that we face. There's always going to be a bad human, or a bad drow, or a bad anyone, because you will find bad people amongst every single group in existence. It inspires everything we do that bad people show up in our narratives. However, when you describe an entire culture as bad and put that culture as the only culture of a certain race or species, you're making a strong delineation from that species, their appearance, to the badness. And there is where you will find all the evil that constantly gets represented in things like D&D, but not just D&D. And of course, I'm talking specifically about evil stuff right now, but this goes for anything. A lot of stereotypes are true to certain specific cultures and then not true of other cultures represented with the same faces. But we don't talk about that often enough. You know, I whenever I hear race, species, and culture conflated, there is a part of me that experiences large amounts of tension, because we're already approaching this from a framework which is just fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to do a part 2 of this and just talk about alignment, because that in and of itself is a whole other topic. But sorry, go ahead, Emma.
Oh, it's just when I first read some TTRPG stuff, I had a negative reaction to the word race being used, which led me to question why that word and why so adamantly still being used. And Daniel, I think at one point you said, well, they're not necessarily species because they don't behave like separated biological species.
Yeah, and it depends on
there's still this weird swirl of this idea of biological basis and cultural ethnic base that gets into the area of race studies and the concept of race.
Yeah, I think what they do really wrong in D&D, I mean, there are a couple things, and we'll talk about. The first point is that they kind of take race, which is a social construct. Like, race is a social construct. Race is not real. It is a social construct. And if you think race is real, then there's a lot of deconstructing to do there, right?
Well, I would change the wording of that a little, in that race has no biological basis. It has no biological, but it is a socially experienced reality.
Yes, it's a social construct of, the fact that humans as organisms like to categorize things. It's the same thing as we talked about on our Character stream about stereotypes, right? Humans like to categorize things. They like to put things into recognizable categories so that we can understand our world. And that's a natural thing in order to make sense of the world. But it's when you say that these categories have... When we say that people who fall under certain categories are then also inherently evil, or also inherently strong or stupid, or sorry, I shouldn't say that, strong or unintelligent, or even in earlier editions of D&D, there were you could get penalties for playing a certain ancestry or race in D&D, like in 3rd edition.
Not to cut you off, Daniel, but I mean, technically speaking, in 5th edition, that's true too, with some of the monstrous races.
True, with the monstrous
races.
For
Volo's Guide to
Monsters.
Right. And I think this kind of points to a larger problem with fantasy in general. The whole idea of fantasy races. I mean, it's some of it comes from Tolkien. A lot of what we deal with in games like Dungeons and Dragons now is filtered through the lens of kind of what he established when he wrote in his books, like fantasy races, like dwarves, men, who he classified as a different race that are now the humans in a game like D&D, elves, and then things like orcs, which were, depending on which interpretation of Tolkien you're looking at, inherently evil or corrupted or whatnot, and a lot of what we deal with in fantasy role-playing games now is still filtered through that lens. And the word race has only very recently, in maybe the last 2-3 years been filtered out of these mainstream fantasy products. So it's a problem.
So one thing that I am curious about, as someone who has not been on these critical reads and or has played that much D&D or read that much into it, I was on the Wizards blog and looking at their post that basically was the one that was talking about the steps that they're taking to address a lot of the problems. And one of the things that they mentioned is that they're changing the way that drow and orcs, drows and orcs are
drow and orcs, yeah.
Drow and orcs are being portrayed in their like in the newer books, like Eberron Rising from the Last War and Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. And I'm just wondering, I mean, that's not what we're talking about right now, which is the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. But also, has anyone like? Is it like?
I've looked at them.
I've looked at them.
It's basically just giving them more depth, like saying that they have cultures too. They're not just inherently evil. They aren't like the orcs in Volo's Guide to Monsters, who take a penalty to their intelligence automatically just by nature of being orcs. And I can tell you right now that in Tasha's Guide to Everything, part of the way that I think they're communicating this new initiative is through the artwork. Like here, you have an orc and an elf being friends, and the orc is giving the elf a tattoo.
And so that not all elves and orcs are at war.
Not all elves and orcs are enemies. And then you have another section here that shows like a drow working with an elf, and it's kind of communicated through the artwork.
But here's the problem with communicating these important issues through artwork. Not everybody interacts with the art. No, well, it's not even the mechanics. It's not everybody is able to interact with the artwork. So like a part of me like it's kind of lazy, and I feel like this kind of ties into that thing that Jeremy actually acknowledges, and it's the fact that they were trying to balance honoring the game's early legacy while also acknowledging that people want to be able to create characters they want.
Are you talking about Jeremy Crawford?
Jeremy Crawford, not Jeremy, not that.
Yeah.
That Jeremy. But Jeremy Crawford. Sorry, I'm not putting words into your mouth.
Specifically, I do want to reference the orc thing, actually. If we're going to talk about Wildemount and Eberron, it should be mentioned that they're not the base game. They're not the base setting. The base setting is the Forgotten Realms, specifically Faerun, if we're being honest. The Western.
Yeah, Wildemount is the Critical Role setting.
Yeah, and Eberron is a steampunk setting. And don't get me wrong, it's great that they're they depicted orcs in both those settings as not evil. Like, that's wonderful. And not giving them a -2 to their intelligence. It's still a problem that for a while, I haven't checked recently, but on D&D Beyond, if you wanted to create an orc, you could create an orc or an Eberron orc or a Wildemount orc.
Yep.
Because the orcs in the base setting were still the orcs in the base setting.
And also that's the orcs in like Greyhawk too, and like most of the kind of like kitchen sink fantasy settings that folks will tend to gravitate towards when first playing a game of D&D. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine. The other thing I do want to specifically mention, because I think okay, so let's go directly back to that interview. Jeremy Crawford specifically mentioned walking a tightrope. And I do have to think that as much as I completely understand him saying, hey, we tried to walk the tightrope and didn't work, I think we're already, again, like I find so much of D&D often starts off on the wrong foot. Because the fact that there is a tightrope to be walked between honoring a game's racist past, which you're acknowledging, and moving forward and playing the game how you want to play it, we're already having the wrong discussion. This isn't about playing how I want to play. It's walking into a game and not thinking, hey, there's going to be awful racial stereotypes in it.
I think it's also when we talk about legacy, that's what I was trying to segue us into. When we talk about legacy, we also have to imagine this as kind of like, this is a business, right? Wizards of the Coast is owned by Hasbro. And there is a lot of bottom-up pressure. And I was talking to another very prominent designer, not in the D&D space, about this. There is a lot of bottom-up pressure from the community, from individual designers, because we know that there are fantastic people who work at Wizards of the Coast. And I think we need to acknowledge the fact that while D&D has some terrible stuff, that doesn't make the people who work there, although there are some, but that doesn't make every single person who works on D&D an awful person, right? Because there are a lot of wonderful people. Steve and I wrote and edited Unbreakable. I work for Wizards of the Coast. I'm in an upcoming book next year. But that doesn't make the people who work at Wizards terrible. There are a lot of people who are trying to bring about great change, and there's this lot of bottom-up pressure. But I think what we as an audience have to realize is that there's also this immense top-down pressure from Hasbro executives who are looking at sales, who are looking at partnerships with other companies, who are looking at these product roadmaps and how these product roadmaps may not actually align with their design roadmaps.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you have a product coming out that's going to feature Dritz Do'Urden, right? Well, what happens when that product comes out, this video game comes out, and Dritz Do'Urden is portrayed as one of the good drow? What happens when Wizards then changes the drow lore in their main books? Then you have a clashing of two products. Not to defend that, but that's kind of what we have to consider when we are trying to kind of figure out how best to change this. Then there's also the idea of the legacy, right? The fact that they are trying to cater to as many people as possible. And there is a subset of the community that they are trying to cater to, whether or not they think they are a big subset or a very loud one. And that's the old school, right? The people who were really against Steve and I initially reading Oriental Adventures, the people who sent me death threats, the people who did some awful things, right? Why are they catering to them? And are they actually catering to them? Because if you think about it, the kind of people who would be considered the legacy demographic for D&D are only really going to be happy if Wizards of the Coast either republishes the edition that they like or acknowledge that a specific edition, i.e. the one that they like, is the true, real D&D. In making 5e part legacy, part new, you are neither catering to the old school, nor are you being inclusive to the new school, right? And I think that's the problem we're seeing right now when they're trying to walk that tightrope. They kind of default to these old tropes because they know that there is, narrative brand recognition, and they don't want to put these, easy fixes like that ancestry and culture into a game because they think it will put off half of their consumer.
I do think that this. I do think that this is an interesting thing to consider. I was thinking about it from the business standpoint. The thing is, I guess in a way we don't know, right? What if they were to actually publish something like 6th edition or 5.5, completely actually addressing these things from the bottom up, or like if they were to publish Dungeon Master's Handbook and Player's Handbook that incorporated or just changed out, for example, like race into a different word. Like, we don't know if there will be immense backlash, right? Like we don't. Like, and I get it, like when you're owned by a big company, like shareholders are like, yo, we gotta play it safe, right? Like profit margins. Like, I get it. So in a way, I feel like, but that doesn't mean that us talking about it is not useful, because this will continue stirring the conversation and it will keep bringing the same discourse back into into focus, right? Like we're going to talk about this and people are likely going to either be like, I agree, or like, oh, I hate this. And then that can become another push to react to this and then tell them basically that we as consumers don't dig this kind of. I don't think that it's a lazy solution. I think it is. I don't want to use the word cowardly. I think it is. It's a very small and insignificant step. I don't think it was because I think this is very purposeful, right? Like they're not being like, oh, like we don't care about this. We're not going to put a lot of work into it. It's more like after consideration, we think that this is the most that we can do because otherwise we are going to have really bad backlash. And then a lot of our customer base are going to leave us forever, so on and so forth, right? So within that, I think a way to think about it is more like, and it's already happening, right? Like with Unbreakable and also a lot of publications where people are saying like, this is what we want and this is the standard for it. And you need to do this in order to move forward with the rest of the 21st century.
Yeah, I definitely, because I don't know Wizards of the Coast and D&D that well, I can sort of maybe look at it differently or just be like, okay, here's what doesn't make sense to me. If you are going to introduce something new eventually, there's no point prolonging the process because there will be a clash. There will be that divide between the old and the new, no matter how you do it. And Wizards of the Coast doesn't seem like the type to stop selling the old version just because a new one exists. So it's not like they're losing that and getting rid of a whole group of players. And for what they've done here, I partly wonder if it was a calculated testing of the waters to see what kind of reaction would happen. Like, do we have to do more? Or was that too much? Like, throw it out into the room and like stand behind something and watch to see what happens.
Yeah, at the wall and see if it sticks. That's basically
yeah.
what
I think some of the frustration comes with that, like, the dipping the toe thing has been a constant. So Eberron was a dipping of the toe, Wildemount a dipping of the toe, although Wildemount wasn't necessarily.
I don't think that was Wildemount was a dipping of the toe, because I think that's product. That's a like a brand collaboration, because that's the Critical Role setting.
I think now it can be seen as a dipping of the toe because they're conveniently pointing back and being like, oh, look what we did there, because Matt Mercer happened to make a more nuanced depiction of orcs, for instance, in his setting. It
also like Wildemount and Eberron, in terms of stats and in terms of mechanics, it's the same thing twice, like literally word for word. The same thing.
Here's the thing: you mentioned stats. I'll ask you, Steve, because I think you and I have been playing of all six of us. I think you and I have been playing D&D the longest. That doesn't make our experiences any more valid, but I think it means that we've had experience with particular editions of D&D. Actually, Jeremy, you mentioned you played Pathfinder, and Agatha, you might have too, right? Okay, so then how about you, Adam Ali? Have you played Pathfinder?
Not Pathfinder.
Okay,
no.
So then I'll extend this question to Agatha and Jeremy as well. How many times have you picked a race in D&D because it was more optimal for your class or the class you want to play? Like, I, for one, always played elves because I like to play archer characters, because elves would get that bonus to dexterity. I didn't pick it because I wanted to play an elf or tell the story about an elf. I ended up picking it because it was what was optimal for the kind of gameplay I wanted when I first started playing D&D. And I know that there are a lot of people who think that. They're like, when they read the book, they're like, okay, this one gets strength, this one gets con, this one gets dex. Okay, as I learn the game, I know that, okay, well, dex is good because dex is going to be great for stealth, and dex is going to be great for archery. And I know that, oh, this one doesn't have good dex, and if I play this particular race, it'll be comical because I'm playing a suboptimal character. And then certain ancestries or races become foils because they are not innately good at certain mechanical things in D&D. right? And I think that's where ancestry and culture becomes a really, really great supplement, because you no longer are building these sort of negative relationships with other races in your character creation process. And I think that's one of the problems with the way D&D currently exists, is that it creates these, positive and negative relationships between skill. Right? It's that bioessentialist stuff that we've been talking about. Now, in terms of change, Agatha, I don't think we're going to see another edition of D&D until 2024, which will be the 50th.
They said they don't want to like put out a new edition. They want to keep like fifth going for as long as possible.
Yeah, and 2024 is going to be the 50th anniversary of D&D. And so I'm sure we'll see something big that year, whether it be 6th edition, because I've heard that there are 6th edition rules being made. There is a dev team working on it. Or if that dev team is working on 5.5. I don't know if 5.5 would be... I don't know. What do you think? Do you think 5.5 is going to be just slightly more effective than Tasha's?
Honestly, I think like Wizards of the Coast to an extent is like afraid of having another 4th edition situation and like another like 3.5 audience moving to Pathfinder situation, because that left a big indent on the role-playing game industry in general. And so you have 5th edition coming out in 2014, immensely popular, very conservative edition despite its popularity, because it depends heavily on people's memories of AD&D and like 2nd edition and how D&D was back in the good old days. That's why you have all these proper hardback books based off of older adventures from the past. Curse of Strahd based on Ravenloft, Tales from the Yawning Portal, an anthology of old adventures, even stuff like, Against the Giants. Like, those are all based on classic D&D modules. And so they've created a very popular edition that is fairly streamlined, certainly compared to like 3.5 and like 4th edition, and is very good at kind of encapsulating what people think of when they hear the term Dungeons and Dragons and people's memories of maybe playing when they were young. And so a lot of old players have come back. And so now Jeremy Crawford and company, they've seen that there is a whole segment of new fans that want this game to become more progressive. And I think that's why he's like, we've got to balance. We've got to maybe dip our toes in the water here while not alienating the folks that, want to play a 5e version of Into the Borderlands. But I think the RPG space in general is moving away from kind of the conservative, let's get back to basics mindset that brought 5th edition into existence. And
what do you mean by let's get back to basics?
Because I think 4th edition, a lot of people didn't like it, and their solution was like, okay, we're going to streamline everything. We're going to remove like the aspects that feel too tactical, and we're going to bring back storytelling. And by storytelling, they interpreted that as a reliance upon, people's memories of 2nd edition, including the bad stuff.
Do you think that 4th edition is actually more back to basics than 5th edition, since it is more war game like?
Maybe, but I personally feel that like 4th edition, like I don't know, like I think a lot of people's complaints with 4th edition was that it didn't feel like D&D to them.
It felt like an MMO.
It felt like an MMO, and I think their idea of back to basics was, we got to stop this from feeling like an MMO.
So then where do they go? Where do they go with 6th edition then, if that's what they're going to do, right? Do they republish D&D with a brand new setting? I would love that personally. Where do they go? Do they go more rules light? Like, how do they change the rule set if they are going to? Or at the 50th anniversary, do they create a brand new setting and keep the 5th edition rule set with some amendments?
I mean, they both have good sides and downsides. The one important thing that I think we need to really mention with the edition wars, and we've kind of touched on it, but I want to restate it for the sake of those who are listening or /watching. Making a new edition, by its nature, divide your player base. Because no, you're not going to have everyone transfer over. That's just a fact. Not only can not everyone afford to, but you also have the nature where people are really attached to their current edition or attached to their current games and thus feel like it's not needed to go forward. Or, people who look at the new edition and say, I don't like whatever that does. Even if it's like, even outside of the race conversation, I don't like whatever streamlined things it makes or new mechanics it adds. I prefer this edition. I'm going to stay with this edition. And that's something that a big giant like Hasbro is going to be, by its nature, very wary of. Because, yeah, we've mentioned before, their 4th edition split their player base in a way they didn't like. They want to be really careful not to do the same thing here. I think we're more likely to see a 5.5-ish sort of thing. Best case scenario, a new set of rules that are then carried on into Adventurers League, but you still have the old stuff being published, so you can still use the same monsters whether you're playing 5 or 5.5. Like that's I feel like
5.5 is going to be the best way for Wizards to continue selling their older stuff, because it will still be, because you could use the 3.5 stuff with the 3rd edition stuff, and it was generally fine. I think what they need to do is do a world reset, like Marvel Comics Brand New Day, DC New 52 sort of. I know, Jeremy, we've talked about New 52 a lot, but but you like a world reset like they do in comics. They do it all the time, right? And people are initially
they did that
mad
with 4th edition, right?
They
the
did.
Sundering for Forgotten Realms, and that was not very popular.
Yeah, but I think when 4th edition came out, the world around D&D was a little bit different. That was like 2008, right? This is 2021, and it might be 2024 by the time this comes out. That would be the best marketing push for it, right? We want a new world. I think most of the fan base really wants a new world. And I think, just think of how many more people. D&D is so much more of a global phenomenon now than it was when 4th edition came out, right? It's so much more global. Or at least there are parts of the world that are having more ready access to D&D, or are interacting with the wider D&D community because of Twitch and all of these shows, right? I think that Wizards certainly has a lot of work to do, and I think no matter what they do, they cannot win. And it's who they want to win with is going to be very important. Now, I'm not asking anyone to take sides. I think that the side that is most important is the side that is the most inclusive and positive. Now, that being said, there are going to be people, and there are already people, who talk about this backlash to Tasha's, the backlash to this very lazy rule amendment, which is just ignore the problematic stuff and do what you're already doing without us actually changing the problematic stuff. That is what Tasha's is. That is what this rule amendment is. And that is what it already says, like Adam Ali pointed out, in the player's handbook. But I want to address one other thing that we haven't talked about. And I don't think, and I fully acknowledge that this is my fault, I don't think Steve and I did a good enough job of doing this when we started reading Oriental Adventures. And I want us to talk about why people might lash out against people proposing these changes. Okay? Because there are going to be people who say, I think it's fine, or the rules in Tasha's are fine. Do what you want to do. Jeremy Crawford just said, do what you want to do. Jeremy Crawford said, don't use alignment. You don't need it, right? How do you respond to people who say that, who say, why do you care? Why don't you just ignore it? And I know that that's a super heavy question. So I'm going to lead with an answer, because if I know that if I ask you, Steve will volunteer, and I don't want Steve to have to volunteer emotional labor, or I don't want myself to post this question to the group knowing that Steve will basically put himself in front of all this emotional labor. So I'm going to answer the way I believe my answer. So basically, there is the argument that, like, oh, you could ignore Oriental Adventures, or Oriental Adventures and Al-Qadim weren't written for you, or you could ignore the original rules on race and use the amendments in Tasha's. The key here is ignore. Some people don't have the privilege of being able to ignore these things. Some people go to a convention and play a game and are told that they can't play a character who looks like them or does what they want to do. Arguments like that, arguments that say, ignore this, or this wasn't for you, hides one's true intentions, and that's that you don't want stories to embrace the real diversity of the world around you. You want worlds that are full of bigotry and racism that enable characters that you want to play and the power dynamics that match the privileges that you possess in real life. There are often people who have never felt any sort of oppression before. In Toronto, we literally had a white restaurant owner defy public law by opening up his restaurant for eat-in dining. And people flocked to him, to Adamson Barbecue, and flocked him, praising him as this hero against the government. And he harbored white supremacists. He didn't have a business license. There were anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, anti-lockdown people there. And this is the first time people like that have ever felt oppressed in their life. Right? So when you see people who are like the six of us who are making these critiques of D&D, and your first intention is to go into the comments or DM me on Twitter and say, you shouldn't be angry about that because they told you that you could ignore this racist stuff. Stop what you're going to say, stop what you're going to type, and sit back and listen to what everyone else around you has to say. Sit back and listen to what people who experience real bigotry, real racism, sit back and listen to what they have to say about fantasy racism and how racism can be built into a game where you tell stories with real people at a real table. So that's all I have to say about that. So if any of you have answers or would like to chime in on that, I really just want to know what you folks think about the response we will get. And it's, these rules are great. Just ignore the bad stuff and use these homebrew rules. Do we, or people who would say, that is enough. We don't need any more rules updates. What would you say?
I know you didn't want me to volunteer first.
Well, you did, because I volunteered first, so you'd be second.
So, okay, great. I'll start off by saying I appreciate and I love you for trying to preserve my feelings like that. But also, I am also completely capable of not volunteering first if I don't want to.
Absolutely.
So,
right.
so I absolutely understand the sentiment here, and I appreciate it. But you need not worry about that because I'm telling you explicitly that I can just make my own decisions in that regard. So thank you, and we can use that moving forward. I do want to comment on how on the Oriental Adventure stream, the amount of hate speech we got afterwards, which took many forms. The way I addressed it was I dove deep into moral philosophy and like what other people had written about what it means to want to be on a side. Like, what does a side even mean and what drives us there? And I learned a lot just thinking about it. And I was even reading from people who I was very much like, I don't think you've ever been oppressed in your life, and your text shows it, but you've given this years of your life. So I will like listen to it. So that said, when it comes to these topics and whatnot, Daniel and I have done we've put a lot of effort into showing kind of the harm that this text can do. But I know when it comes to talking about harm, some folks think that, harm is inevitable. If you are in a society, you can have to be prepared that some people will be treated better than others. And that's your opinion. And like, you can have that. And if that's how your heart is, it is what it is. But as we move forward here, my ask is that, when it comes to other ways you can think of the human experience, that maybe we don't think about the harm, but we think about the liberty of what it means to express ourselves. And when you try to have that conversation and say things you say are less valid than things I say, you don't have to think of it in harm. You can think of it as liberty or free speech or what have you. And that is I hope also valid. But at the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is play the game and have a good time with it. And I think everyone deserves that. And if you think everyone deserves that, we should at least start there. And if we need to diverge, we can. But I would hate for you to stop a conversation for your own detriment. And yeah, I put the onus back on people who would say negative things about this. And I challenge you. I absolutely do. I say, hey, swallow that pride and listen, because that takes courage. It is cowardly to speak over someone else's voice. And I say that directly to the viewers out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we try to do with, I think that's one of the things we try to do with Asians Represent is we want anybody who watches our videos, whether it be you watch a video on YouTube, you watch a stream on Twitch, or you listen to the podcast, because we are a podcast, despite what people seem to think. We want to encourage you to deliberately open your mind to things you choose not to see because they make you uncomfortable. Because we want you to start counteracting a lot of that unconscious bias that you have. Be it unconscious bias that you have when you talk about your love of a game like L5R. And that's one of the things that we saw a lot of really productive conversation about within the L5R community and our own communities. So we want to challenge you to think and listen to things that you might not have noticed before, and accept that those things that you might not have noticed before are very much real. So when you go to people and you say, hey, race isn't a problem in D&D, like Steve said, take a step back, think, and listen. Okay, open up your minds to things that you choose to ignore or you have the luxury of ignoring. Right? Adam Ali, Lemmy, Lucky Hand Dice, and myself, we spent 2 hours reading Kindred of the East. And it might be the worst TTRPG I've ever read to feature Asian cultures. And it might be the reason why we haven't done an episode 2 yet. But there were a lot of people who were like, no, this is fine. Just ignore it. Don't use those characters. You could be an Asian vampire and not be a kaijin, right? But those people have chosen not to open their minds to the reality that we face. We have to interact with those worlds or see those kinds of materials. Right?
Yeah.
Emma?
So I'd like to just add that this is happening and has been happening in a lot of places, not just TTRPGs and D&D world, that those who are being hurt the most are expected to do the most work and put in the most effort to make it less harmful for them. And so if we're expected to do all of this labor to protect ourselves, I think it's reasonable to expect some labor of people who haven't experienced this or just don't know to learn and be less harmful to other people. And I'd also like to add, I don't know if it's come up yet, that it has in other streams that we are all fans of things with problems. And that I totally understand that there's an attachment to D&D in any form that it comes in, and that this can be really integral to who people are, where they feel comfortable, the spaces that they've come to consider their own. And so change is difficult. Like, we understand that, but that's not a reason to not assess what you've been a part of and what you're now saying should continue.
I mean, I have a lot of friends who are like, this stuff doesn't bother me. Like I told them that I was doing the L5R stream, and like a friend of mine was like, oh, I'm just not really bothered by the fact that they don't necessarily, this is an Asian friend. He's like, I'm not really bothered by the fact that they don't get everything right on Japanese culture. Like RPGs in general and fantasy stuff is all like Celtic stuff thrown in a melting pot and whatever. And I hear that argument a lot, but it gets down to the fact that perhaps you aren't bothered by this, but other people might be. And playing role-playing games is a very social experience. We really get invested in our characters, and a lot of feelings emerge when you're playing at a shared table. And there is, as Daniel, as Steve, as everybody here on the stream has talked about in the past, real potential to do harm and to feel uncomfortable, even if you're playing in something that seems like maybe it shouldn't matter. Like I played in a game of D&D, one of the rare games that I actually get to be a player in a few weeks ago, where I played a Dragonborn, and the DM had my character come in a tavern, and all of the tavern folk thought that I was like a kobold and were like calling me the wrong species and kind of drawing attention to me, which sounds like it's just a fantasy scenario, but that's racism, and that's what happens in real life to real people. And the emotions that I was feeling, even though we role played it out, and even though I trusted this DM, but the emotions that I was feeling for just a moment were quite powerful. And in a situation where I did not trust the DM and I did not trust the other people at the table, I would have probably been very emotionally affected by that and would not have participated again. Mm-hmm. So there are two lessons here. The first is only approach a situation like that with people that you trust and are willing to, have that kind of role-playing experience with. And the second thing is these things do matter. And it's worth listening to the opinions and the experiences of other folks when they talk about their problems that they might have with D&D, with Legend of the Five Rings, with Kindred of the East, with whatever.
Yeah. So we've got a couple more minutes left. In fact, we've only got 5 minutes left. So does anybody have any closing remarks or anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, actually. So I feel like, and this again is one of those things that I love to repeat myself. It's one of my favorite things, but this is a conversation that it could last for centuries. Because so long as there are problems, there's subjects we can talk about. In D&D specifically, there are a whole host of issues in 5th edition, from the fact that Tasha's new sort of variant race is just a variant human, which already kind of exists, to beyond. But I do want to mention, when it comes to 5th edition specifically, I respect the fact that this is a hard thing to move forward on when you're dealing with a big company. And I respect the fact that they don't want to split their player base. I respect a lot of it. I totally understand where they're coming from. However, I think that moving slower is costing them more than moving faster would, even if they don't realize it. And I also believe that, frankly, it's hurtful that they consider their this legacy they've built a bit more important than just comfort at the table. Because the truth is, when people come to me and are like, well, they say you can play around with whatever you like now, I would respond with, okay, so I sit at your table, what do you do? And the answer usually I get is, well, I mean, my orcs are evil, because that's easy, or you need villains to fight. And we come back to the truth that so long as it's not in the base game, so long as it's not in the core mechanics, so long as it's not in the player's handbook or the DM's guide, we're always going to come to situations where a racialized person, when we're talking specifically about this issue, but it can apply to multiple things, homophobia, transphobia, but when it comes to the race issue, when a racialized person will sit down at the table and then never look at 5th edition again because they've been that hurt.
Yeah,
you're always going to have that.
And I know there's a big hurdle to these changes. And that hurdle, well, we'll see after 2020, but that hurdle is going to be Adventurers League. Because Adventurers League is something that's so very, very rule-driven. A change like you have in Tasha's is going to be hard to then permeate into the Adventurers League ecosystem. But that's something we could talk about on a different day. We're running out of time. That said, I want to thank all of you folks who tuned in live or listening to the audio wherever the audio is going to go, be it our podcast feed or an exclusive to the One Shot Network, or just watching it on YouTube. These are tough conversations. The wrap-up is intended to be a weekly series, but I'll see if we want to make it bi-weekly. If you have any thoughts on whether or not you want us to change the format of the wrap-up, do you want us to include a Q&A section, let us know. Hit us up on social media at AZNSRepresent. We have a brand new website, aznsrepresent.com. You can check us out there, and you could even send us an email to that website if you would like. Agatha and I both check the email. We just love seeing what you folks think, whether it be constructive criticism or even if you have something negative to say about us, we love learning and we love improving Asians Represent as a brand. So please, if you want to see the wrap up grow, if you want to join us for future episodes, or you have ideas, hit us up on social media at AZNSRepresent. All of our social medias are underneath our videos, but if you're listening on in an audio format, or I know a lot of people we actually got this really crazy comment on our Discord where somebody liked the video editing so much that they weren't sure if an episode had ended because it just sounded like one fluid 40-hour conversation about Legend of the Five Rings.
It all goes to your wild editing. Daniel, you do a great job.
But that being said, we have Agatha, Mighty Shrimp, double Y. Daniel H. Kwan, that's me. D-E-E-E-M, Steve. DM isn't for Dungeon Master, it's to slide into his DMs. Jeremy, Pixel Grotto. Don't forget, Jeremy's got a blog, pixelgrotto.tumblr.com. Jeremy, you also forgot to shout out the fact that you run one of the biggest Batman Instagram accounts.
I do, yes.
Out there. What is it again?
Follow classic Batman panels on Instagram if you like Batman stuff and want to see me talk all about comic book things. Classic_Batman_panels.
You got like 40,000?
Yeah, like 40,000 followers.
It's insane. Emma, starchiologist, because you study starch, and Adam Ali, our resident werewolf feels on Twitter. Y'all are awesome. I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do for next week. Part of me is like, should we do the food episode?
Should also let them know they can join the Discord if they want to communicate with us as well.
We have 2 new moderators on our Discord community. Hey, it's Emma and Adam Ali. What we're going to do is... hey, I forgot. Hey, did one of you get the Discord invite link? One of you want to generate that right now?
I'll do it. I'm on it, Daniel. I got it.
Thanks, Steve. We're prepared. This is a professional stream.
Volunteering right away.
Volunteer right away. No, Steve always does the Discord stuff during the streams. We are taking on 50 new members of our Discord. We're very specific with that number. It's 25 per mod right now with how we're growing, because we want to make sure that we can have constructive and respectful conversations in our space, and we want to make sure that we can moderate that. So Steve is going to throw that link into our Twitch chat. The only way to get the invite link is to join us on Twitch, or just to watch it on Twitch. In order to watch on Twitch our past broadcasts, you have to be a subscriber. That said, follow us on social media at AZNSRepresent. We are almost at 1,000 Twitch followers. We're 96 away from 1,000 Twitch followers. So if you're watching this right now on Twitch and you aren't following, follow us. Follow us on Twitch. We're almost at 1,300 YouTube subscribers. I am so happy. Let's try to get to 2K. I'm so proud of all of you. Agatha, Steve, thank you for joining me as co-hosts of the Wrap Up. Jeremy, Emma, and Adam Ali, thank you for accepting the Wrap Up role on our Discord, and I can't wait for you to join us for future episodes. My thoughts and ideas, and I will float this out to you, and I think this could be a thing that we do at the end of every episode. I've got 2 spicy ideas and one not as spicy idea. So my not so spicy idea, my medium spice idea, is we actually invite Chris Spivey to be on the show, the first non-Asian guest on an Asians Represent property, to talk about the whole Matt Mercer Haunted West controversy, and to do like a postmortem, like a what went wrong, what can be done, what can be done better, and what is Haunted West all about.
That's a less spicy one.
That's my least spicy one.
What's the spicier one?
My next spicy one that that numbing spice is we do a whole episode on sensitivity readers. And
That's less spicy.
no, that's by more spicy.
That's
Okay,
the more
okay.
Numbing spice,
Okay.
Steve.
Chris Spicy. Chris Spivey.
Chris Spicy. Yo, publish that. You got it. That's for free.
Perfect.
Chris Spivey was the less spicy option.
Yeah, because I
and-
feel like that's more of like a community conversation.
Yeah.
When I talk about doing an episode on sensitivity readers, I want to talk specifically about the response to the new Conan the Barbarian RPG using sensitivity readers and the backlash they received for that.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, I need to
that's
read
the
that now.
that's the first level of spice. The next one is, does alignment work or does alignment matter? I want us to talk about alignment. Actually, I feel like that's less spicy than the Kickstarter Conan the Barbarian.
Alignment can get very.
Yeah, but I want to
Heavy.
talk about
They can
one
all
of
get very
those
heavy.
one of those three. That's the roadmap that I have, and I don't know what order we're going to do it in. We could do alignment, we could do Chris Spivey, or we could do sensitivity readers. That's currently what I have.
Ooh, alignment.
But we are taking more suggestions.
We are
so
taking more
please send them
suggestions.
to us.
But also, the whole point of the wrap up is for us to address what is currently happening. Asians Represent
Yes.
is a really tough show to produce because we have to do a lot of research. We have to wrangle people together, and then I have to edit all the audio. With the wrap up, we're able to respond very quickly to what's happening in the community. So if there is something that you want us to talk about, hit us up. We always check our Discord community. We have a channel that's just podcast discussion and stream discussion. So that's where we'll be looking. So if you want to interact, if you want to participate in the discussions about the wrap up, hit us up on Discord. Steve just dropped the link there. There are 50 uses. Please join us. And then food. We'll do food is the least spicy, but spicy in experience maybe.
But we'll be spicy physically.
Yeah. You know, can all of you
Maybe.
handle spice, by the way? Are we all good for spice?
Oh yeah.
Spicy
Yeah.
food episode, the spiciest of all episodes. So yeah, we'll do something like that.
I've won an award for eating the spiciest wings as fast as possible.
Okay, but who
But who gave
were
this
your
award?
competition?
Did you give this
Y'all-
award to yourself? Because we were
No,
like,
no,
who do you recommend? And you were like, myself.
No. Okay, fair. I totally did that. But also, no, I've gone to a restaurant. They're like, here's the challenge off the menu. If you can do it in like these parameters, you win a prize. And I did. And I did it without breaking a sweat while an in-law perished. It was great.
While an in-law
Wait.
parrot?
No,
Not
no,
literally,
they
not
didn't-
literally.
Not
the spice,
figuratively
yeah.
perished. Figuratively perished. I apologize. I can be very like.
Story is
Terrifying.
wild, and I feel like we don't have enough time to dive into the details.
So,
And I did it on
our,
purpose.
our chat
Like-
is just like blowing up with food. So everybody wants us to do food. So maybe we'll figure that out. We got the budget to do it, so let's do it. That being said, folks, thank you for tuning in to the wrap up. Y'all are awesome, and Steve, Agatha, Jeremy, Emma, Anima Lee, thank you for being here on this Friday. I was really sad that we weren't going to be hanging out talking about L5R, but I'm happy that we were able to do this.
Me too, because
So-
I could be here.
Oh, me too.
I'm
Well,
not sad about it not being L5R anymore, but it's nice to have a.
I'm kind of
regular
glad
hangout.
it's not L5R.
Jeremy, we're all like, I'm so sad. Jeremy's like, I'm done with L5R.
For now.
It's about the hangout, not the
Yeah.
L5R.
It's about the hangout. So again, folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.